Welcome to Session 3, Positive Discipline of Parenting Wisely. I will be recording this session and I am asking you to pay close attention because at the end of the session I will ask you 3 questions and ask you to email me the answers to those questions. And then we'll do session 4. I will let you know in a day or two when we're ready to do that. Then we'll do session 5. And at the end of session 5, you will do a test. Email me that with your plan of what you're going to do with the skills covered in this class. And then you can either pick up your certificate or I will email it to you, whatever you prefer. Please pay attention. It will not be as long as the 2 hours because you're not sitting in front of me. I will tell you when something that maybe you need to write something down. When we talk about rules, you definitely will. So please have your pencil and paper ready. Thank you, and I hope that you get a lot from this. I'm sorry about all this that's happened, but we want to get you through and get you completed so you can get your certificate. All right, here we go. Positive discipline. We know that discipline is necessary to deter destruction. If you never disciplined your children, they absolutely would tear up everything you have because they would not know that they should not tear things up. You discipline with words and action, things you say and things you do. The goal of discipline is to teach obedience. And you want your children to be obedient. I don't know of anyone who would not want their children to be obedient. I think you do, and certainly you can have obedient children if you have good discipline. There are 2 components of a strong and effective foundation in a child's life. And those 2 components are discipline and training. You discipline to teach. Discipline means to teach. You're teaching your children right from wrong when you discipline them. You're teaching your children what is and is not acceptable in your home when you discipline them. But also, to go along with discipline, you train your children. And train means to prepare. So you are preparing your children for life. We only have them, 18, 19 years. And a lot goes on in that 18 or 19 years. So you training them for and preparing them for life on their own. And that is what we're supposed to do. So discipline and training go hand in hand. And when you have discipline and training, you provide in your child's life. When you mix it with love, it becomes their foundation for life. So discipline means to teach. Train means to prepare. We know it's not always easy to discipline a child that we love. It isn't. But by giving in to the temptation to let it go this time, slowly, as a parent, we become a gentle, sympathetic, understanding, loving father or mother who is totally controlled by their child. You don't want that. You do not want that. You are the authority figure in the home. God made you the parent and them the child. You have authority over your children, and your job is to discipline them. And you can do a really good job with that if you will pay attention and use the tools that we talk about. Some people think that discipline means punishment, but in reality it does not, because punishment focuses on the past. Discipline focuses on the future. So I'm going to give you an example here that I want you to pay attention to. The example would be there was a 9-year-old little boy, and his father had told him many times not to play ball in the backyard because the next door neighbor, Mr. Smith, parked his car back there. And if the little boy was playing ball and the ball hit Mr. Smith's car and broke a window or dented it or something, then Mr. Smith would be very, very upset. So the father told the son, do not play ball in the backyard when Mr. Smith's car is parked back there. Okay, he knew what he was not supposed to do. The father had told him over and over. Sure enough, he played ball back there. Mr. Smith's car was parked in his yard back there, and he did indeed hit his car and break the window. I'm going to give you two examples of what would happen, and you help me decide on the one that would be disciplining in the right way, teaching your child. Okay, so the first one is the little boy breaks Mr. Smith's window with the ball. He runs in and tells his dad what he's done. His dad goes into a rage and screams, I told you not to play ball back there when Mr. Smith's car was parked there. You have done what I told you not to. So he gets a belt and he whips him. Now, fear works for the short run, and some kids, fear would work for them for the short run. But is it teaching anything? Is it teaching? Yeah, it's teaching to be afraid. It's teaching to be fearful. It's teaching to be resentful. So, that's number one. The second example would be something like this. The boy comes in and tells his dad, oh, I was playing ball back there. I broke Mr. Smith's window on his car. What am I going to do? So instead of the father going into a rage, he did say, I've told you many times not to play ball when Mr. Smith's car was parked back there. So this is what you're going to do. First, you're going over and tell Mr. Smith that you broke the window in his car. Second, you're going to ask him if you can do chores for him to pay for that window. If he says no, and he might say no, then you are to come back to me. I will give you the money to pay for Mr. Smith's window to be fixed, but you will have to pay me back. We will take money out of your piggy bank, and then you will owe me, and I will make you do chores to earn that money to pay for that. Now, with those two examples, I hope you think the second one would work best, because he is actually teaching that child something by, number one, making him go and tell Mr. Smith, number two, making him pay for it himself. You learn lessons from your mistakes that way. Sometimes a whipping or a spanking or something for that doesn't always teach something. So discipline means to teach because it focuses on the future. I'm trying to help you learn not to do this again. Punishment sometimes focuses on the past, and what are you going to do about it? He's already broke the window. All right, I want to share with you 4 stages of discipline. All right, when a baby is born, we call them an infant. An infant is from birth to about 6 months old. The only way that you need to discipline that age child is to meet their needs in a loving, gentle way. That is picking them up when they cry. That is meeting their needs if they're wet, cold, hungry, whatever. But just picking them up and meeting their needs in a gentle way. Then, when they get about 6 to 7 months old, they begin crawling on the floor, and that is how they learn to walk. So we begin to use redirection and substitution. So redirection would be, let's say you have surround sound in your great room or den, living room, what you might call it, and your child goes to that surround sound, and you sit over on the other side of the couch and pop your hands and say, don't do that. Well, you're going to scare the child, and they are going to move away from it for just a minute, but they'll go back. They'll go back. So at that age, when they're first crawling and learning to walk, then we use redirection, which means we get up off the couch, we go over to where they are, we pick them up, and we bring them back and give them something that they can play with. And we call that substitution. So we've redirected them back to something they can play with, and we call that substitute. We're substituting something they can do with something they cannot. Will you do this many, many times before they learn? Oh, yes, many times, many times. All right, so then they become toddlers, 2, 3, somewhere in there. We begin to do those same two things, meet their needs in a loving, gentle way, redirection and substitution, but now we're adding rewarding good behavior. Because when they get to be 2 and 3, children are very smart. And when you reward them, and not reward them with a lot of money or anything like that, you reward them with a praise. You reward them with a thank you. You reward them with a hug, with a kiss, something like that. But we reward good behavior. And why that is important is because children want to please us. They really do want to please. So they will do things to please us if they know they are pleasing us. So, and also we begin at this age teaching them what it means to be cooperative and helpful, allowing them to help you with very small things. Then they get 3 to 5 years old, and then we begin using a tool called Time Out. Time Out is a very effective tool with children. Time Out works like this. You find a place in your home where everybody is not around, and you put a chair in there, and you put that child in that room for their time out. Time out works like this. If they're 4 years old, 4 minutes in time out. If they're 5 years old, 5 minutes in time out. So the way you do that is when they have done something, a misbehavior that you do not consider appropriate, you take them to their timeout place. Now, when my little girl was young, we used timeout in the dining room because that was not a room where there was a lot of traffic going back and forth. She could still see that we were there. We didn't close her off or anything, but there was not traffic in and out of there. So that was where her timeout little place was. And I would take her in there, tell her what she did for the reason that she has to sit in timeout, and then she would sit there if she was 5 years old for 5 minutes. Now, when you start this, it's going to take you a while to make it work. You do not continue to add minutes every time they get up and come back in the room, come to you. You just take them back, tell them why they have to sit there, and eventually they will understand that they're in time out. When the timeout period is over, tell them to come out, give them a big hug or kiss, and let it go until the next misbehavior. The goal in that is for them to learn when I do something that mommy or daddy doesn't approve of, I have to sit quietly and think about what I've done. That's your goal, and that's what you want to accomplish. Timeout is a wonderful tool, and I hope that you will use it with young children. Then when they begin to be maybe 6, always according to their maturity, then you begin putting consequences in place. Consequences are something that you take away from a child. Always try to make it as relevant to the misbehavior as possible. When a child doesn't spend enough time doing their homework and doesn't do it right, then do not allow them to play games or be on any technology or watch TV. If a child cuts up and doesn't go to bed when they're supposed to, then make them go to bed earlier the next night. Some things like that are consequences. We consider consequences, and this tells a child that if I do not do what I'm supposed to do, there will be a consequence. And you continue to use consequences all the years that you raise these kids from there, especially in the teen years. And consequences really work in the teen years well. You can take their phones away from them. You cannot allow them to go somewhere. If they're late coming home from curfew, you can not let them go out the next weekend or whatever. But consequences they really do work. And if you start early with those, then children know that there are consequences put in place. And I think that's very important for your children. So, to recap on this, when they're an infant, meet their needs in a loving, gentle way. When they start to crawl and walk, use redirection and substitution. When they become toddlers, begin to reward good behavior and teach them what it means to be cooperative and helpful. When they're 3 to 5 years old, start putting time out into practice. And then when they get to be about 8 years old, begin putting consequences in places for their misbehaviors. All right. When we discipline our children, we help them find direction for their life. If children never had any kind of discipline, they're not going to behave in school because they don't know. And they have to have discipline when they go to school. So it helps them grow up with a clear understanding of right and wrong. And that's what you want, parents. You want them to know right from wrong. And that depends on how you discipline your children and what you are teaching them as they learn what discipline is. It is an act of love, because I am going to tell you, if you love your children, you want to discipline them because you want well-behaved, well-mannered, obedient children. Every parent should want that from their children, because if they have that in their home, if they grow up with that in their home, then they're going to practice it in school, on their jobs, and in their life as adults. And that's very, very important. So I want you to think about that when you think about discipline. All right, so let's talk about physical punishment. Is that effective? You can spank your children. You can't beat on your children. You can't abuse your children, but you can spank them. A spanking would be on their bottom end. So let's talk about physical punishment. I think when you slap a child in the face, when you verbally abuse them by cussing at them, saying things, screaming and hollering at them, that definitely is verbal abuse and physical abuse. If you slap them on the arms, knock them around, hit them with your fist, any of that kind of stuff is certainly physical abuse. So some people think that's the way they should punish their children. And if you do that, it often works to make them stop what they're doing at the moment. At the moment. That's what we talked about a while ago. Fear works for the short run. It seems effective, but is it effective? Punishment of this kind creates bad feelings in children. It prevents learning to behave in a proper way. Because what have you taught them? You've hit them, you've knocked them around, you've beat on them. And what have they learned? What have they learned? Maybe to hate you, to not want to be around you. All of those things comes with physical abuse and physical punishment. And I will tell you, parents, you cannot do this. You cannot physically abuse these children. And there are so many better ways to discipline your children. Physical punishment is quick, and it comes naturally. Sometimes when we as parents are frustrated and angry, sometimes we do get that. But you really need to find a way to handle your anger when you get to that point, so you are not at risk of physically abusing your children. It does not teach correct behavior. Sometimes it teaches hitting will solve problems, and they go to school and they hit their schoolmates and they learn to hit. And then when they become teenagers and they're bigger than you are, what's to say they won't hit you? So it does not work. So you want to always teach discipline by helping your children do the right thing. Some of the ways we do that, first of all, you need to be a good role model to your children. And that means act as you want your children to act. Children learn by watching how you handle things in life. If you scream and holler and yell and cuss, they're probably going to do that too. And that isn't what you want to do with your children. That does not teach discipline at all. If you get upset and you get angry a lot, frustrated a lot, and I know this is a hard time right now when we're all in the house with these children 24/7, we're homeschooling them, we're doing all those things. It is tough and it is hard. But if you get upset, take a time out for yourself. Calm yourself down. Think things through. Do not make threats or take out of your anger on your children. And never make a threat that you cannot keep, because children think about those things. Show your children affection. Love and discipline go hand in hand. They help children grow up strong and secure in their life. So you show your children affection, love on them, love on your children. Your time with them is fleeting. I know that's very hard for some of you to believe, but that it is. And you don't get a chance tomorrow to do what you didn't do today, because tomorrow's going to have enough problems of its own. So think about that. All right, so when you think about punishment, we're telling a child what not to do in a hurting, painful way. He still doesn't know what he should have done instead. A child who is slapped or beaten will likely grow up to be an angry teenager. Punishment interferes with learning. Kids that are knocked around and slapped and beaten and all, they don't learn well because they're afraid. And you know what? If you grew up in a home where you were physically abused, beat, slapped on, whatever, you're more likely to abuse your own children. Now that's the statistic, that's the stat. So think about that. But you can change that. You can learn a lot about positive discipline just listening to this and applying what you learn from here. So when we think about misbehavior, think like this. All children want to belong. They want to belong. They want a feeling of belonging through both useful behavior and sometimes misbehavior. Sometimes kids don't get the attention they need from parents, so they will misbehave to get that attention. Like my mom always said when we were growing up, they're going to get your attention one way or another. They're going to get it in the correct way by you spending time with them, you disciplining your children in the right way, or either they're going to get your attention by misbehavior, doing things that you don't want them to do so that you will pay attention to them. And a lot of times when we pay attention to them in that way, we're abusive and we punish in the wrong ways. And you do not want to do that. So think about that, guys. All right, so cooperation. Cooperation is a big part of positive discipline. Sometimes the challenge of parenting for all of us, because we want to raise children who are happy, healthy, confident, cooperative, loving, and lovable, and responsible. It's hard. It's not easy. So we have to teach those things along the paths of life as these children grow. I mean, you teach a child to be happy by having a happy environment for them to live in. A happy environment means there's peace in the home. A happy environment means a clean home, one that's not cluttered and dirty. A happy environment means where parents do not fuss and argue among themselves, where there is peace in the home. Children will be happy. We want them to be healthy, so feeding them the right kind of food. We talked about that in the last session on nutrition, health, and child safety, so I hope you remember a lot of that. To raise confident children with high self-esteem, they need a lot of encouragement, a lot of praise, and a lot of opportunities to excel. Loving and lovable children come from parents who love each other and who love their children, show affection for their children, and spend time together with their children and as a family. And we teach them to be responsible by holding them accountable for their actions. Always holding them accountable for what they do. That is very important. One of the ways that you can help your child to cooperate and be responsible is by setting limits and giving choices to those children. And you start that at an early age. You set limits on things that they do. You can watch television for an hour. You can play a game on your technology for an hour. You can play with your toys. You can play outside a certain amount of time. That's limits. That's setting limits on things they do. And then learning to give them choices, helping them learn. Choices are very important in life. They can start out with choices like, can I wear the pink pajamas or the blue ones? Can I wear tennis shoes or sandals? Let them decide. Can I have raisins or carrots for my snack? Can I take a bath at 6 o'clock, or do I have to take one right before I go to bed? Choices, helping them learn choices. I ask the question of you as an adult. Do you make good choices? Do you know how to make good choices? It's very important to teach your children, and you start that at a very, very early age, and that is definitely a part of good discipline. Expectations are powerful. Expectations that you have for your children are powerful in discipline. If you expect misbehavior, then your children are probably going to misbehave. But if you expect obedience, then your children will probably obey. One of the ways that I can share with you for expecting the expectations you have for your children, let's take, for instance, when you go to the grocery store. I can remember this about myself. I would have to go to the grocery store just to pick up something for dinner. And I would tell my child in the car, on the way to the grocery store, I am in a hurry. I do not have time to fool around in there. I've got to get what I need and get out. I expect you to sit in this buggy, not to ask for anything. You cannot have any candy. You cannot have any toys. You cannot have anything. Just sit in this buggy and be quiet while I do this. And you tell them before you go in the grocery store. Now, a child who hasn't had that from the very start probably is not going to do that. But my suggestion to you there is, if they are not obeying you, doing what you ask them to do when you go in the grocery store, take them out of the cart, leave your food in the cart, and leave the store. Take them home. If you don't, then you're sending a mixed message. I talk to you and expect you to behave, but we get in there and you don't, and I do nothing. So what have I taught you? Nothing. So I think our expectations are a lot more powerful than we think. So if you expect obedience, then teach your children to be obedient. Talk to them about what you're doing. Talk to them about what's important. What is a better time than right now to talk to your children about this COVID-19? Talk about this and help your children understand you cannot be close to somebody. You cannot kiss and hug on people. You cannot go out of the home and play with other children. Help them to understand and know that by talking to them and then by making it happen. And that is totally up to you and totally in your ball game, parents. Totally. When the ball's in your court, that is totally you. And if you do it, they will be obedient. Takes a lot of practice and a lot of time, but if you do it, they will. Now I want to share with you some methods of effective discipline that are good, and you should think about using these. Think about writing these down. Using distraction. Talked a little bit about that when we talked about redirection. Distraction is taking the child away from something that he's doing that you do not approve of or is a misbehavior and distracting him with something else. Sometimes we have to ignore misbehavior when appropriate. Like sometimes if it's not the end of the world that the brother and sister are arguing with each other, sometimes you just ignore that. You don't ignore it when they begin to hit and hurt each other. Separating them is the best thing there. Sometimes we have to structure our environment so they don't get in trouble, which means when they're little, put things that you don't want broken, things that you value, put them up so they can't break them. So we don't have a reason to get mad at them and to do something that we don't want to do to our children. Sometimes controlling the situation and not the child works. Like, for instance, if your child is out playing with a little next door neighbor and they start fighting each other or fussing with each other, control that situation by going out and getting your child and making them come in the house and sending the little neighbor home. That's controlling the situation. And that's really all you need to do. Then certainly involving your child through choices and consequences. We talked about choices. Do I wear the sandals or the tennis shoes? Choices, giving them choices, and then, of course, using consequences age appropriately. Anywhere from 6 on up, certainly consequences put in place are very appropriate. Always plan time for loving your children. Children who are loved and know they're loved feel more valued in the home. Children whose parents show affection to those children, hugging on them, letting them sit in your lap, playing with them, being there for them. All of these are times for loving, and all children need that. To feel good about themselves, to have a high self-esteem, to have confidence in themselves. They need that. They need to know that they're loved. If you told them 1,000 times a day, I love you, it would never be too much. Now we know that's impossible, but it would not. Tell them a lot. Let them know how much you love them. Play games about how much I love you. I love you to the moon and back. I love you this whole wide world. All kind of things that are very, very important. I share this little example with you. When my little girl was little, we used to play this game, and I'd say, I love you to the moon. I love you all the way to heaven and back. And she'd say, and I love you all the way to the moon and back. And we'd play that game and we'd talk about it. Today she is a mom on her own, and every time she writes me a card or thanks me, sends me something to thank me, she always signs it, I love you this much, and then she'll draw a line all the way around that card, up and down and on the back and on the front of it. I love you this much. So they remember these things, and those are things that are in their memory banks for life. Love your children. Show affection for your children. Increase your consistency. That is going to make or break your parenting. How consistent you are. Now, consistency means doing the same thing over and over all the time, which means if you correct your child today for jumping on the bed, do it tomorrow, the next time they jump on the bed. If you do it today and then tomorrow they're jumping on the bed and you're on the phone with a friend or something and you just let them jump, that's not consistent. And when we do that, the children don't know that I can't jump on the bed. They get mixed messages from I can do it today, but I can't do it tomorrow. So they don't understand that. So consistency is very, very important. If you have a bedtime for your children, and you certainly should, especially during school nights, don't move away from it. If they're to be in bed, go to bed at 8 o'clock, put them in bed at 8 o'clock. Do it every night, whether you're tired or got something else going on or what. That is the way they learn. 8 o'clock is my bedtime. Be consistent in what you do with your kids. I can never tell you how important that is. Remember this. That is going to make or break your parenting. Consistency is huge. Notice positive behavior in your children. When you see them doing the right thing, praise them. Tell them thank you for helping you. Anything, praise your children, because every one of us like to be praised. And what we know about that is the more praise we get, the harder we try. Now, I'm not talking about false praise, but I'm talking about real praise. If they really do a good job making up their bed, praise them for it. If they make 100 on their homework, praise them for doing it. I mean, just all kind of ways to praise good behavior, because that is teaching and that is discipline. And then, of course, always, like we said, the tool, exclude your children with a timeout, is a really great tool. And I hope you will use that. Okay, some other tools for discipline that are very, very important. So listen to these. Reward the good. When your children do positive things, when they behave well, reward them. Remember the ways to reward: a hug, a kiss, a praise, something, a little extra time to do this or do that. But rewarding the good is an important tool in positive discipline. Practice positive discipline yourself as a parent. Be a positive person yourself if you expect your children to be positive disciplined. Use timeout, one of the tools that we talked about. A loss of a privilege. When you start to use consequences, the loss of a privilege helps them understand what a consequence is and deters them from doing that again. Does it take a lot of practice? It does, but consequences work, and they carry your child on through the teen years. And then the consequences themselves. So I want to go over those again. Reward the good, positive practice yourself, using timeout, loss of a privilege, consequences. Those are good tools for good discipline. Okay, so how do we set the stage for good behavior in our home for our children? Well, you can build a good relationship with your child if you show respect for them, respect for their father or mother, respect for other people living in the home. If you have fun with your children, enjoy them, play with your kids, enjoy playing with your children, giving them lots of encouragement. And these kids need a lot of encouragement on their schoolwork. They do. They need a lot of, and they will work harder. Showing love, hugs, kisses. And you can teach your child with rules, and we're going to spend some time on that in just a few minutes. Structure in the home is very important for children so they know what is and is not acceptable. Structure could be a thing like we eat meals at a certain time, we go to bed at a certain time, we get up at a certain time, we have this amount of time to play, we have this amount of time to do our homework, we have this amount of time to do other things. So structure in the home is big for disciplining your children. Routines. Every child needs to live with routines. This is a positive way that they grow to be obedient. Routines are things they do the same time every day, always. We get up at a certain time. We eat breakfast before we get dressed. We have certain times to play. They very much follow the structure in a child's life. But routines, we eat meals at a certain time. They go to school. They leave home at a certain time. They do their homework at a certain time. They take a bath at a certain time. They go to bed at a certain time. All these things are routines in a child's life, and they need routines. They certainly do have routines at school. So you need to practice routines in your home with your children. They need that, and they deserve that. Follow through. Now, we haven't talked about that much, so I want to talk to you a little bit about follow through. Follow through is very important. That's the way that you teach your children about rules. Follow through here's how it works. When you ask a child to do something, or you have a rule in your home for your child, then you do something to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do. We call that follow through. If you have a rule in your home for your child to make up their bed every morning when they get up, then your follow through with that would be to go in there and check to make sure they've made it up. Sometimes if they don't want to do it, your follow through would be standing over them while they do it. Sometimes if they're a child that's very hard to discipline, might be making them do it by actually taking their hand and making them make it up. Sometimes it's just reminding them to make their bed. But follow through is very important, and that is always what you as the parent does to make sure that your children are doing what you ask them to do. Okay, so that's very important for your children. Another way that we set the stage for good behavior with our children is providing as much freedom as possible. Like I told you a while ago, putting up breakable objects, having special places for your children's toys and making them put them back there when they finish. And here's something that's really important, guys. I want you to think about this. Spend more time emphasizing what they can do rather than what they cannot do. Now, if you want to have well-behaved children, instead of staying on them all the time, just tell them the things that they can do as a part of their routines and their structure, instead of always fussing at them about something they do that they're not supposed to do. Always explain clearly the behavior you want. Remember the example I used about going to the grocery store? Talking to your child before you go in the store about the behavior you expect. Children need to know up front what they're supposed to do, and they are going to be more obedient if they know that. If they don't know that, then why would they not behave? They would not. They would not know not to behave if we don't talk about that and teach them and tell them what our expectations are, and then help them follow those. Remember what I said about if you get in that store and you've told them what you expect and they do not do it, pick them up, take them out of the store, leave your groceries, come back and get them later. That's far more important for that child to understand. I was supposed to do this, and my expectations were to do this, and I did not do them. So there is a consequence, and that is taking them out of the store and taking them home. And then you want to always teach your children to do as many things for themselves as possible. And that starts early, teaching them to tie their shoes, teaching them to wipe their own fanny when we do toilet training, teaching them to do their own homework, teaching them to put up their dirty clothes, teaching them to wipe down the bathtub when they get out of it, teaching them to make their bed when they get up. All those kind of things are things that we teach our children to do, as many things as possible. Be very consistent in your family routines and your rules. Remember that. Always, you can do that by giving your child choices and doing substitution and redirection. Okay. Sometimes we need to know what misbehaviors at what ages that children are going to do. And sometimes we think misbehavior isn't often a part of learning and growing. And that's not always true. They're not always misbehaving if they're learning and growing. So we need to know what to expect at every age. I think this is important. Encourage your child's desire to learn. And the way you do that, parents, is let them see you read. Read the newspaper, read books, read the Bible, have reading literature in your home, and read yourself. This will encourage them to desire to read. And reading, they got to learn to read. They got to know how to read. So set that stage for them and help them do it. Read to them. Help them love books. Read with compassion and help them want to read. Help them enjoy that. And always guide them towards safe and appropriate behavior. And for different parents, that can be different. But safe and appropriate behavior is teaching them how to be safe, what to not do to be safe, and all those kind of things. So work on that. Now I want to give you just a second here, how you make positive discipline simple with children. Number one, act quickly. When they misbehave, correct that misbehavior very quickly. The reason for that is young children have a short attention span, and they are going, if they misbehave at 9 o'clock in the morning and you tell them when your dad gets home at 5 o'clock, he's going to get you, they've forgotten what they did at 5 o'clock when he comes home. So when they misbehave, act quickly and correct them for what they've done. Now, that's not true with teenagers. You can tell a child that when their other parent gets home, they're going to really be in trouble, and let them stew on that and think about it all day, but not with young children. Be consistent. Remember what I told you consistency is, doing the same thing over and over all the time so your child does not get mixed messages about what the routines and the behavior is in your home. Be authoritative. Now, authoritative, you got to have an authoritative voice, and I don't know if you know what yours is, but you should. An authoritative voice means you've gone from having fun with your child, where you're very pleasant and everything is good, to giving them a command to do something. And they need to know what that authoritative voice is. And one of the ways that you can learn what yours is yourself is you can do this. I remember when I was growing up, I learned very quickly. My mom's authoritative voice was when she pointed her finger at me and called me by my first name, Martha Lynn. I knew that she meant for me to do something. So recognize what your authoritative voice is. Think about it for a minute and decide what it is so your child learns when you've gone from playing and having fun, meaning to do something. Okay? That's very important. Remember to praise good behavior. That goes a long way with positive discipline. Keep your cool. Don't get angry and lash out at your children. If you get upset and you're losing it, then find a timeout for yourself for a few minutes and then come back and deal with the problem. And then always set a good example yourself. You've got to set a good example. All right, now we want to spend a little bit of time on rules here. Okay, rules are very important at the home. All children must obey rules. Without rules in your home, you have chaos. And you don't want that in your home. We don't want chaos. So children have to learn to obey rules. Remember what I told you sometime back here. You are the authoritative figure in the family. God made you the parent and them the child. So we have authority over our children. We use that authority with rules. Rules that we have in our home for our children. And every home needs rules. Okay, you have to provide those rules for the child. That is our job as a parent, to provide rules for our children. Now, when you think about rules, your rules have got to be clear. When you tell a child what to do, it needs to be clear. Make your bed. That's very clear. Pick up your clothes. Very clear. Get started on your homework. Very clear. All right. Then remember what we talked about follow through? You have to do something as a parent to make this happen. So we call that follow through. So when you tell a child to make their bed, you follow through with checking to see that they've made it. And if they have not, then you go get that child, you bring them right back, you stand over them and while they do it. In the child's mind, they have to learn, I have to do what my mom or dad says. And this is the way they learn it, by our follow through, what we do to make these rules work. You must be consistent. There's that word again. Consistency will make or break your parenting. Please be consistent. If you have a rule that says do your homework as soon as you come home from school, then every day be consistent enough. Get on your homework. Start your homework. And then whatever time you have planned for them to do their homework, or however long it takes, they can't do anything else. And you're checking on them all the time to make sure they're doing it. Okay, so you got to be consistent. All right, now let's get you. This is where you need your pencil and paper. All right, think about this. The elements of a good rule, I'm going to give them to you. Tells the child what to do. Make your bed. When to do it. When do I have to do it? Every day. Now, how to do it, if that's necessary, but we're going to assume that the child already knows how to make their bed. You've already taught them. And then how often do they have to do it? Every day. Make your bed every morning when you get up, or make your bed every day. And you might want to say every morning when you get up versus every day, because if you just make the rule, make your bed every day, that means they can make it when they get up or they can make it at night. And I don't think you want that. So your rule tells them what to do, write that down, when to do it, and how often I have to do it. So what to do, make your bed. When do I have to do it? Every morning. And how often? Every morning when I get up. So what to do, when to do it, and how often do I have to do it are the elements of a good rule. All right, so let's look at a rule for a minute. All right, probably one of the first rules that you would have in your home for your children would be brush their teeth. We want them to have good hygiene. We want to teach them that brushing their teeth is important, and they need to start young brushing their teeth. The beauty of that is when we have a rule about that when they're little and when they're young, by the time they get old enough, it will become their own rule, and they'll brush their teeth because they want to have a nice smile, a clean mouth. And sometimes because they become interested in the opposite sex. Okay, all right, so we're going to have a rule here, and it's about brushing your teeth. Okay, so you have a rule, you have a follow-through, and you have a consequence for doing it or not doing it. So let's look at how that works. All right, the rule: brush your teeth before you go to bed. All right, that tells the child what to do. Brush your teeth. All right, when do I have to do it? Before you go to bed. How often? Well, maybe we need to put in there, brush your teeth every night before you go to bed. Okay, tells them what to do, when to do it, and how often they have to do it. All right, brush your teeth every night before you go to bed. Your rule might be brush your teeth every morning when you get up. Okay, make sure those three elements are in there: what to do, when to do it, and how often. All right, your follow-through on that, which is going to determine whether or not they obey this rule, is you're going to check to see if you're going to help them, first of all, teaching them to brush their teeth, helping them to learn, and then you're going to check to see if they brushed them. Example would be, the child knows now they've been doing this for a long time, and they know they're supposed to brush their teeth before they go to bed every night. So, you go in there to tuck them in, and you ask, did you brush your teeth? That's follow through. Did you brush your teeth? And let's just say, for instance, he says, no, and it's cold, and I don't want to get up and brush my teeth. Well, sometimes some parent might say, well, okay, brush them in the morning. Sometimes a parent might say, well, okay, you're going to have rotten teeth. Any of those answers are wrong. Your follow-through and your consequence are the same here. They yell, and they say, I didn't brush my teeth and it's cold. Then what you do is go over, turn the covers back, help them get out of bed, and you march them into the bathroom and stand there while they brush their teeth. Is that hard for us as parents? Because we're very tired ourselves at night. Yeah, it is. But that's the way you teach obedience. Follow through is asking them, did they do it? Consequence is, you don't say, well, okay, you didn't brush your teeth, so you're not going out to play tomorrow, or you're not going to watch, or you're not going to be on the video game. Well, how has that helped anything? Are their teeth going to rot? Oh, yeah. Is that more important than a video game? Hey, so your follow through, checking to see that they've done it, and then the consequence being, if they have not, making them get up, go in the bathroom, and brush their teeth. And what they learn from that is, and what you will see when you are consistent and you do that over and over and over, you will see in their little mind, they will begin to brush their teeth before they go to bed because they know, I have to do what my mom or dad says. And the reason I know I have to do it, she's going to come in here and check. And if I hadn't done it, she's going to get me up and make me go back in there and do it. So you see how important that is, and you see how that goes a long way in teaching children. So you have a rule about brushing their teeth. Another rule that you're going to have in your home, along with one of the first rules that you have, is washing your hands. So let's say you have a rule to wash your hands before every meal. Okay? So they know they're supposed to do it. What do they have to do? Wash their hands. When do they have to do it? Before they eat. How often? Every meal. Okay, wash your hands before every meal. Okay, good rule. All right, got this child, they know what they're supposed to do. Sometimes they're not going to do it. You know that. So here's the way we handle that. You're getting ready to put dinner on the table. They come in from playing outside, and you say, go wash your hands. They might say, I don't want to wash my hands. My hands aren't dirty. Well, then what is your follow-through, and what do? You march them in there, and maybe at the kitchen, maybe in the bathroom, and you help them wash their hands. And if they don't want to do it, and they pitch a fit, then here's what you do. The consequence would be you can't eat until your hands are washed. Now, here's what you want to think about on that. Don't let them eat. And if they refuse to wash their hands, then just let them sit in the living room while the rest of the family eats. I can guarantee you when they get hungry, they're going to eat. And even if they choose not to do it because they're a little bit strong-willed, don't give in. Don't let them eat until they go wash their hands. You don't have to fuss and get ugly. You don't have to do anything. Just use your follow-through and a consequence that you've put in place there. Got to wash your hands before you can eat. Okay. All right, so those are very important. Now, some mandatory rules that I think that parents should have in their home when their children are young, and these are just some that I feel like are important. You may have others that you think. Certainly washing your hands, certainly brushing your teeth. How about feed the dog? A lot of people have dogs or cats. Do your homework. Have a regular bedtime. Put things back when you use them. Those are important rules to start out with in your home. Of course, we learned what your follow-through is and your consequences for washing your hands. Can't eat. We know what the follow-through and consequence is for brushing your teeth. You're going to get up and go brush them before you can go to sleep. Feeding the dog or feeding the cat. How about that? Maybe if they told you they were going to do it and you bought the dog or cat for them, then you have to escort them to the dog food and help them learn to put it in the dog plate and help them understand that they have to do that. Doing your homework. Set a rule when. Do your homework every day as soon as you come in from school. Do your homework. Homework must be done before dinner. Whatever your rule is, follow through to make sure they've done it. Put things back when you have used them. Let's say they take a bath and they step out of their clothes and they leave them in the floor. You go in and check, and they're laying in the floor. Your follow-through is you've gone in to check. Your consequence for that would be you go get them wherever they are, if they've gone to bed or if they're watching TV, or what they're doing, and you march them down to that bathroom. You know you're supposed to pick up your clothes when you get through taking a bath. Make them pick them up and make them take them to the clothes hamper, the dirty clothes, or wherever you keep them. Okay. Got that? Rules. What to do, when to do, and how often. You got to have rules in your home for your children. All right, let's talk about chores for a minute. I believe that every child should have chores to do. They can start chores at an early age. When they can throw toys out of a toy box, they can begin to learn to put them back. Of course, with your help. But let's just say your kids have been playing with their toys and now it's time to take a bath to get ready to go to bed. You can say, we've got to pick up all the toys before we go take our bath. And you help them pick them up. And then when you've helped them enough, then you put a rule in place. Toys must be picked up before bedtime. So you put those rules in place. You follow through to make sure they're doing it. And then if they don't, you make them. Consequence could be make them get up from where they are and make them do it. Chores gives a child a sense of importance in the family. And you don't give them chores to help you. You give them chores to teach them obedience and to teach them structure and routines. But they learn a sense of importance in the family when they're a part of it. It takes the whole family to make a household go around, the whole family. They gain a sense of accomplishment from doing it. When they make up their beds and they've learned to make it up real well and you praise them for it, wow, what a sense of accomplishment that is. And what the important thing about chores is this conditions your children to believe that their parents are the loving authority figure in the home. When they have to do chores and it is a part of your home life, they learn very, very early that you are the loving authority figure in the home, and it gives them a sense of accomplishment. Don't pay your kids to do chores. Oh, absolutely not. We don't pay our kids to do chores. Don't demand that they do it now. If you have a chore for them to do, tell them, pick your toys up, it's time to get ready to go to bed, and give them a little time frame there. Then, of course, when you check and they haven't, and it is bedtime, then you go get them, do it now. That's the time to do it. That's very important. Some discipline ideas for parents that I think are important would be when we treat our children with respect, then they'll want to do their chores. Emphasize the positive in your children. Set clear limits so they know what time they have to go to bed, what time they have to get up, how long they have to play, how long they have to watch TV, how long they have to do their homework. Clear limits are very important in the structure of a child's life. Always enforce your rules with consequences, and start out with consequences of just making them go do it by using your follow-through. Never correct a child when you're angry. Settle down, cool off, and come back to it. That way you're not at risk of abusing your child. You're not at risk of hurting them in some way or saying something that you might regret the minute it's off your tongue. Be reasonable. Be fair. Be consistent, and be supportive. Those are some really good ideas for parents. All right, let's think about what we do when we yell at our kids. That hurts. Being yelled at hurts. I remember in one of the parenting classes that I did a couple of years ago, I had a mom in there, and she was talking about, when we talked about this, and she said, that is very true. My mother used to yell and scream at me all the time. And I can remember when she never did anything. She just yelled and screamed. And when she would yell at me and scream at me and cuss at me and say things, ugly things to me, I would just go get in the closet. And sometimes I would fall asleep in that closet. And today, as an adult woman, I'm kind of afraid of the dark. Could that have had anything to do with it? Maybe it did. Well, if we don't discipline in anger, then we're not at risk for hurting our children in any way. When we yell excessively or use verbal abuse, it is very frightening to our children. But a child learns fear when parents yell at them. So don't do that. Another important thing I think is important for us to talk about in this class would be raise your children to have good values. Now, we're going to spend the whole 5th session on that, so we'll come back to that, but that is very important. Teach your children to have compassionate hearts. A compassionate heart is helping them learn that other people are very important. Teach them to do for others. Help them learn that. I can remember when my daughter was young, my Sunday school class used to go to the nursing home once a month on Sundays. And I would take my daughter with me because I thought she needed to see the compassion that we had for those elderly people that lived in the nursing home. We would go there and talk to them, spend time with them, roll them around in the nursing home, and just talk to them and love on them. And she learned that. She learned a lot of compassion from that, and I think that's very important. If you don't give your children opportunities to be involved in those kind of things, they won't have compassionate hearts. They won't learn that. Instill in your child a good work ethic. And the way you start that is through chores. And then when they get to be teenagers, they need a summer job. They need to cut grass. They need things to do. And then teach your children to respect other people. And the way you teach that is by you respecting other people and you respecting them. Hold your children accountable for their actions. Always hold them accountable for their actions. The goal of discipline is to educate your children about right from wrong and to teach them rules about proper behavior. To make this easy, your decisions about what is allowed and what is not must be crystal clear. They need to know what is and is not acceptable in our home. They learn that from the rules you have. It's unacceptable to stay up all night. It's unacceptable to eat snacks that aren't healthy. It's unacceptable to stay on the phone all night. It's not those things. They learn those things. They learn what is and is not acceptable in your home from the rules you have and the decisions that you make about your children. Be tough. Be strong. Be loving. Be loving to your children. When we do this, we build walls around our children that will not crumble. And those walls are things like love, encouragement and praise, boundaries, where they know what their boundaries are, and that is included in what is and is not acceptable in the home. Their limits on behavior, rules, follow through, and consistency. They learn all of those things, and that's so important. Children are never too old to be told they're loved. Say I love you 1,000,000 times if you can work that in. I know it's impossible, but let your children know you love them. Tell them you love them, hug them, kiss them, be affectionate. And a great place to start that is good family communication. So I hope you've learned some things about positive discipline in this class tonight. What I'm going to ask you to do after you have watched this and you have written down some of the rules, what to do, when to do it, and how often, I'm going to ask you to answer 3 questions and send them back to me by email. The first one is, what are the tools of discipline? We went over those. The second, what are the elements of a good rule? We went over those. And then what are the 2 components of a strong foundation in a child's life? So after you have watched this, email me the answer to those 3 questions. And then I will inform you when we will have session 4 and session 5. Thank you for watching, and I pray that you will have good discipline for your children and you'll be a good disciplinarian. Love your children. Thank you. Have a great evening. Bye.